Good evening, everyone. And tonight's webinar is going to cover a wonderful trip around the UK, largely focused on the IWA's Silver Propeller Challenge. It was one of the greatest initiatives of recent times in IWA to get folks out on the waterways looking at areas of the waterway network that were seldom visited or were just right on the edges of new up and coming restorations that were nearing completion. So I won't spend any more time because I know you're anxious to hear directly from Michael and Joe. And so Michael and Joe, thank you for doing this Waterways webinar tonight. Welcome, and I'll hand over to you now. I'll see you later for the Q&A.
Great, thanks, Paul. We're here. Thanks everybody for joining. Bit of an unusual thing for us. We don't really do live before, and we've never done Zoom, so definitely going to be a little bit of a first for us. So yeah, well, basically, let's just get started. For those of you who don't watch the channel or anything, suppose the main thing is, who the heck are we? Well, that's pretty simple. I'm Michael. I'm an American and Canadian by birth, but it turns out that I like living in England. Joe is a British native who doesn't mind Americans too much, and George is our English Springer Spaniel who has joined us along the way.
And together we live on narrowboats, Perseverance. We've lived on the boat for just over 3 years now. We moved aboard in 2017. And it's our home.
Yeah, Perseverance 1900 is the official name. We don't know what the 1900 is about. She's a 57-foot 2004 Liverpool boats, which is kind of the Ford Fiesta of narrowboats. So she's not exactly fancy, but she does the job. So we really, really love her. And how we got together is a question that a lot of people end up asking us, so we're just kind of going to go over that quick. In 2013, we were both traveling around the world, pretty much independently and going in opposite directions because of our own sort of life decisions.
Yeah, and in about August of that year, Michael was traveling from south to north in Vietnam, and I was traveling from north to south, and we bumped into each other in the middle, and we had a really great conversation, and then we both carried on and finished our trip.
Yeah, it was kind of a funny conversation. We actually met outside of the world's largest cave, and I was just one of the people in a little talk about the tour. Joe came to the table to listen to me, and in about 30 seconds decided I was just full of it and an overly
loud American.
Talk
too much.
Yeah. And so she headed off, but we continued the conversation that evening, and basically just kept talking until they shut down the place. So yeah, it's just been an epic conversation. And though we did split up and go our separate ways in our trips, I continued north through Vietnam, Joe continued south, and then I went through Europe and everything. We did meet up again in Chiang Mai, and then we eventually met up, having kept our conversation going on Facebook and everything, in Malibu. And at that point, we kept going. We didn't really like the idea of sitting still.
No, the plan was to move back to London and save a bit, but then Michael ended up getting a job in New Zealand, so we pretty much immediately went around the world again in opposite directions and met up in New Zealand, lived there for 18 months, traveled a bit more, then
got engaged immediately after I had an appendectomy and was a little bit too out of it, but I made the right choice even though it was against doctor's orders.
Then we ended up moving to California, lived in Los Angeles for another year. And we felt like we really wanted to keep moving. We didn't want to stay still in one place for too long, but we didn't really know how we were going to maintain the traveling lifestyle.
Yeah, and while we were in LA, we were kind of looking back at these weird travels that we'd had to these strange little places, and we were sort of stuck for a while and trying to come up with what that option would be. And ultimately, an idea struck. Basically, one day before I was heading off to work, Joe wasn't really working at the time, and it was partway through our green card.
Yeah, I didn't have a visa, so I couldn't work, and Michael was working really long hours, so he'd set off one morning, and just before he left, he had this throwaway comment about, why don't we move to England and live on a narrowboat?
Yeah, which really was a throwaway. I had flown over to London for 2 days in, I think, 2007 or 2008 to visit a friend, and on that visit we were in Camden Market, and I just saw this guy on this little boat moving through a lock and thought, well, that's a fascinating life. And so it really was just a total throwaway. But I came home like 9 or 10 hours later to find that Joe...
I'd spent the whole day just researching living aboard a narrowboat, and I'd been on YouTube, and I had this long playlist to show Michael of people in England like living this unusual lifestyle.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I'd say it was probably about 3 videos in that I was kind of like, well, we could actually do this.
Yeah, and it was a bit weird because it was quite an instant decision, but we kind of kept waiting for ourselves to change our mind and be like, no, we won't do that, we'll do something else. But the weeks and the months passed because Michael still had another 6 months on his contract, and we didn't change our mind, and it was still the plan. And
yeah,
and
but then eventually we kind of come to the part of, well, how did we actually end up here? Well, we decided this was it. We figured out what the boats might cost, what we were going to have to do, and we sorted out the visas. And at that point, we got onto a plane, and on January 1st, 2017, we arrived in England. We had to do quite a bit at the beginning to sort of, set up the legalities of arriving and do all of the things like getting a bank account and all of that. But then we pretty much immediately set off to find our boat, and we started driving around
the whole country.
It turned out we had we knew we wanted to continuously cruise, and we knew we wanted to see the whole connected network.
Yeah, our idea was not to sit on a mooring the whole time or sit in a marina. If we were going to be on a boat, we wanted to keep moving and see different things every week or every other week.
Yeah, and now Joe found out relatively quickly that I have a completely different idea of see everything than most people. So we knew we had to have a boat that was a really go anywhere boat, and it had to be a boat that was suitable for living aboard. So we already had these specific needs, but it turned out January is really not the best time to try and look for a boat in England. So what happened was we actually left, and we went to India and Nepal. I had a friend to visit, and we wanted to go to his village in Nepal, and Joe and I got to see parts of India and some rhinos and all sorts of crazy stuff. Well, we lived as cheap as we possibly could and spent a bunch of time on Apollo Duck looking for what our boat might be.
Yeah, we were on this amazing trip, but all we could think about was getting back to England.
Yeah,
Move aboard
so
a narrowboat.
A little bit distracting. So after a couple of months of warming up and letting England warm up in the meantime, in April, we finally came back, and we arrived in London ready for our second search. And we did the same thing. We planned to kind of go everywhere, and we had this list of boats to see off in all these far-flung places, because, the London area isn't exactly the best place to search far and wide for a boat that actually fits us, especially because we'd had this experience of going in and finding out that what some people will advertise as 6'4" of headroom is roughly around the middle of my eyeballs. So we kind of needed something that would work for us. And oddly enough, we found it in Purford on River Way, literally just a few miles from home. So we went there, we found Perseverance. It was really the first boat we ever stepped on that we kind of knew.
That felt like it could be a home, and it wasn't perfect because it had never been a liveaboard before. But Michael could stand up in it, which was a bonus, and it just felt right that this was the boat for us.
Yeah, so after doing a few things like repairing some leaking mushroom caps and removing a not in great condition cratch cover, and getting ourselves sort of prepped out, we set out, and by the beginning of May, we were like, okay, we're ready for our epic quest. Here we go, first day out. And we had to return the next day when all of the batteries died.
I think this is the mooring. This picture is the actual mooring where the batteries died. So
yeah, it's like the first mooring we get to, we're, you know, we've turned the boat, we've gone through one lock, we've made it this far, we've thought, okay, you know, this is,
we're on our way.
We're on our way. This is enough for today. Let's moor up and have a nice, you know, cuppa and lunch and everything. Sleep through the night, wake up to all of these alarms going off because the domestic batteries completely died, which would be an ongoing problem for about 3 months. We do keep trying to tell people that the beginning of moving on board is
a learning curve.
Definitely a learning curve.
Yeah.
So after that, though, we really did get moving, and that's when the Minimal List begins. Now, Minimal List is the name of our YouTube channel. Before we left Los Angeles, Jo had indicated that she wanted to edit and learn how to edit. And we knew we wanted to do this to keep my mom up to date.
Yeah, because we spent the Christmas before we moved aboard in Canada with Michael's family, and nobody knew what a narrowboat was. Nobody had any idea like what this mad plan was. So the idea was just to kind of keep them a bit informed of what we were actually doing.
Yeah, because I mean, your parents knew what a narrowboat was, and they thought the plan was mad. So,
yeah.
So yeah. But we really did think when we got going, when we started doing it. It turns out Joe's really a natural at editing, which is amazing because I'm trained in it, and I'm not anywhere near as good. And she started making these videos, and they caught on. We found very quickly that we had people who would chat with us on our videos and tell us things about where we might see things along the way.
Yeah, and just give us tips and help us out and mention things that we didn't know about the boat. And it was just like the narrowboating community is a great community to be part of anyway, but you take that online and it just adds like another dimension to it.
Yeah, because like they saved our bacon so many times with like our solar install and all this sort of stuff. And once George, who's just making a bit of noise there, decided to join the crew on the K&A, our numbers just shot up because he's more or less the star of the show, really.
Yeah, lots of people only watch for George.
Yeah. But we mention our viewers because it really was them that told us about the Silver Propeller Challenge. We would not have probably found out about it on our own, at least not until it was sort of, we were too far along and didn't really know where we were.
No, so like, yeah, about a year and a half into our travels, we were in Birmingham on the Birmingham Canal navigations, and there's quite a few Silver Propeller locations in the area. So we kept getting these comments on our videos saying, oh, that was another Silver Propeller location. And we were like, what is this?
Yeah.
What is the Silver Propeller Challenge? So we looked it up and we realized that we'd already visited, I think it was 9 locations at the time.
Yeah.
And that's just down to Michael making us go to the end of every arm and to the end of every canal and down every...
I think we would have hit 6 without me being pernicious about that.
Yeah, if that. Sadly, we'd missed a few, but we'll tell you about those in just a little while.
Yeah.
So when we saw the list, we thought, yes, let's actually go for this. It's a really good initiative. You know, let's actually start actively collecting them and counting them. And
yeah, because it was already pretty much contiguous with our plan. Like, yeah. It was what we were intending to do. So, you know, we had started out on the Basingstoke. We made it to the BCN. We'd been all over the place, but we'd been primarily in a lot of areas where there weren't Silver Propeller locations. So as we moved north, we started to go, well, where the heck have we actually been? What is our list? And these are our first 20. Now, these are the ones that actually got us to the point of winning the Silver Propeller Challenge. Receiving the Silver Propeller, getting to the end of it. And, you know, we did the Ashby, the Arawash, the Grand Union, large portions of the River Thames, Avon, and the whole of the BCN over winter, which was good fun with a capital F. You know, and eventually last year,
in October,
yeah, just before or just after Halloween, somewhere around Halloween, we made it up the Huddersfield Narrow in something of a downpour to get ourselves to the edge of the Standage Tunnel. And then finally, 3 miles later, you went over the top.
Yeah.
And I went through the Pennines, came out the far end, and we found ourselves at the end of our 20th. And it was like, okay, here's our moment of celebration. We've made it. But we don't like to stop, so we kept going. So now we slowed down a bit because round about number 22, somebody created or set loose or whatever a pandemic. And effectively we got stuck for a little while. but so 21 happened, and then there was a big long pause as we spent 3 months sitting in one part of the Chesterfield Canal waiting for our ability to move forward. But since restrictions have decreased, we were able to make our way to the end of the canal, to the Narrowwood Tunnel, and then off of there up the tidal river ooze out of Goole to the Pocklington, and then all the way past York to Ripon. So we've now hit 24.
Mm-hmm. And obviously the idea is just to keep going. We kind of want to collect them all.
Yeah, there's 39 locations total, so there's 15 left. And this is the locations that are on the continuous system. There are other disconnected ones, which we hope to visit at some point via, well, possibly a canoe. But won't be making it with Perseverance. So, you know, we've got to these 24 and we want to continue on for the rest of them. However, I want to show you a quick little video of us actually making the 20th and getting to the point where we fully earned the Silver Propeller. Hopefully this plays back okay for everybody. It's a short clip.
So yeah, this is just coming out of the Standage Tunnel at the visitor center, and after about 2 hours.
2 hours underground, and you can see that Halloween is definitely around. I've just passed a plastic skeleton that some wag had left on a little brand charm in there. So, you know, I'm not clearly in the best mood, but it was really, I'm also soaking wet, but it was a lot of fun. And that was the end. And we were like officially here.
Yeah, that was number 20.
Number 20. So locations we've missed so far, just to go over relatively briefly, these are the ones that we were near. We've been close to them, but we've had to skip them for whatever reason.
Yeah, so the first one was actually the second canal we went on, and we missed this for 2 reasons. The first reason was we were there in, I think it was June 2017. So the Silver Propeller Challenge didn't actually start until January 2018. So if we had made it there in 2017, it just wouldn't have counted. But the second reason was that when we were on the Basingstoke Canal, it was closed at the end because of a landslide. So
yeah,
we didn't make it to the end.
Yeah,
so that was really sad.
After making it under one of the lowest tunnels on the entire canal with like half an inch, bridge. Yes, one of the lowest bridges on the entire canal with like half an inch to spare. We make it through there, and you know, we thought we were getting shot at. We weren't shot at, but somebody was firing guns nearby at a firing range, and I'm ducking behind the steel. We make it through. We get to the end, and there's just a you know, floating barrier across the canal because of this landslip. So we haven't actually been to King John's Castle, but hopefully at some point on a rental boat. The number 2 is the Dudley number 1 canal, south portal of the Dudley Tunnel. Our Perseverance is too tall to actually make it through the Dudley Tunnel. So we had come to the north end of the Dudley Canal, north end of the Dudley Tunnel, found out on the sizing gauge that we were too long, went through, came around to the south end. But we hadn't at this point heard about the Silver Propeller Challenge, so we were just a bit lazy.
Yeah, so it's basically 3 locks up to the south end, and we moored at the bottom of them and walked up to have a look at the tunnel.
Yeah.
Without realizing that if we'd taken the boat up, we'd have
done it. But to do this, it would be 2 locks that would be fairly easy, and then it would be a third that would put us wedged into the tunnel, and then we'd have to reverse out and reverse down 2 locks. So it was kind of like a little more daunting.
But we do it now.
Yeah, we totally do it now. We regret not doing it. The third one is the Fens branch on the Stourbridge Canal, literally just around the corner, really, from the Dudley Tunnel.
So these 2 you could tick off in one day if you were in that area. But this one's really annoying as well, because we set off that morning and Michael said, I'm going to go down, and this is obviously before we knew about the Silver Propeller Challenge, and Michael said, I'm going to go down the Fens branch just because I can, and obviously I was not that excited about the prospect.
No, she was going to stay there in the little basin before it and just wait for me to come back.
But we'd hit a flight of locks that morning, and one of the pounds had been drained, so it had taken us a long time to get through, and then by the time we got to the branch, you kind of changed your mind.
I was just like, I looked down it, and okay, I didn't really realize when you look on the map there's a little more to it, but when I looked down it was like, am I really just going to go like 300 feet and then reverse back? It just seemed, it was too daunting at the end of a really long day, and I've been regretting it continuously ever since. because these are the two that we voluntarily missed.
Yeah.
Right? Everything else has been like.
And if we'd done them, we'd have got the Silver Propeller like a few months earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Number 4, also on the BCN, although a little bit closer to Wolverhampton, is the Wednesbury Oak Loop and the Bradley Workshops, which we actually really wanted to get to, and we turned down their intent on getting there. Made it probably about the first 1.5 kilometers around a big curve, and ran smack dab into a CRT workboat that was wedged into a tiny portion between two, like what, there was a constriction in the canal. And it was floating free. So we were told by the CRT that somebody might have cut it loose or something.
We didn't find that out till later, but because we saw this workboat and the canal was really shallow, we thought there might be some work going on, and we thought we weren't supposed to go past it.
Yeah.
We later found out that someone had just untied it, and we could have gone past
we could have pulled the boat out of the way and gone through, which was really quite annoying, especially because I had to do a ridiculous reverse to get out of there. And then the 5th one we just passed, the River Foss in York.
We did that last week.
We could have done it. We were sitting right there. We would have loved to have done it. Unfortunately, although the Foss is a very short little canal, and it would only take less than 2 hours to visit, and it's a beautiful little, there's a fascinating little lock there that you have to book ahead to have the IWA send out volunteers to open. Was really hoping to go through it, but unfortunately the council there has shut it down temporarily while they do repair work on the flood barrier from the River Ouse. So that's just out of commission at the moment.
So that one's bad luck, and I don't know that we'll make it back up here because it's the tidal ooze to get up here. So
yeah, it's kind of crazy that number 1, we think we might figure out a way somehow of getting 2, 3, and 4, but 1 and 5 are so far away from each other.
Yeah, like like Basingstoke Canal is probably one of the southerlymost points, and the River Foss is one of the.
It's like the second most northerly almost.
Yeah.
So yeah. At some point, I might have to just take a train and rent a boat. So then we wanted to go over our top 5. These are the sort of
our favorite places.
Our favorite places. Don't miss. You know, when it comes to the things on the Silver Propeller Challenge, absolutely worth the visit. Although some of them are, again, like everything on here, not the most commonly visited. So we're going to do them in reverse order. Number 5 is the Dudley Canal to Coombswood Basin, where you pass through Gosty Hill Tunnel.
Yeah.
That was a really bizarre day. You know, we'd come through the very large modern tunnel to get down there, turned left onto this little arm, thinking we'd just sort of get there to get some diesel, because we'd heard that the diesel was a good price and that everybody was very friendly there. And it was like, okay, we'll just head down here. And we started passing these steel cutouts of things like elephants and navvies working and everything, and they sort of explained the history of the canal, and the elephant was particularly bizarre. And we
knew there was a tunnel, but we didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, we did not predict or understand that as we came around the corner to the point where you just sort of snap into position and you can see down that this tunnel is quite not really very long. I mean, it's only a few hundred meters, but it's very short, extremely straight, and only a few inches wider than our boat.
Yeah, and you're pretty much crouched down the whole time going through it. George didn't like going through it.
Yeah, and the very first thing that you encounter as you actually go into the dark and the front of your boat just disappears under this really low bit of brick is this picture of a vampire just welcoming you. It's very strange. Absolutely worth the visit. And Coombswood Basin itself,
it is friendly, and there is cheap diesel.
Yeah, it's a really hard reverse to get in there. Like, it's a crazy little turn, and you have to squeeze through this crazy little tiny little sort of bridge overpass thing. And but they're super friendly. Really nice place to spend some time. Absolutely worth the visit. Number 4 is a little bit on the other end, because this one's really public. The Leeds and Liverpool Canal and Liverpool Docks.
Yeah, it was just really such a different experience cruising through the old docks. I mean, there's a few other docks that you can visit, but Liverpool was the first place that we'd been, and it was just so much history, and like, you know, you're really low down, and these huge bollards, mooring bollards for ships, and
yeah, that are like almost as big as half the boat.
Yeah,
and they, you know, it's there's all the history of it, and you have to book ahead to go down the locks, and it's a little bit of like that beginning rush to get down there. But then as you turn and you've got the long path that brings you around through the initial basins, you're passing sailing ships, and
then you've got the like iconic view of the Liver building and then the famous docks. It's just
just absolutely a must visit, and it puts you smack dab right at the edge of the city of Liverpool, which is itself just absolutely worth a visit.
And it was the start of another adventure, because a few days after we arrived, we left, but instead of going back through the docks, we went across the Mersey, which not many people do.
Not many boats do that. Not many people go out onto the actual Mersey, but it was definitely an interesting way to exit the docks. Number 3 is the River Thames all the way up at Inglesham, which is basically as close to the actual source of the Thames as you can currently get. It's navigable a little bit beyond Inglesham if you're in a much shallower drafted boat than us, but we made it to the Roundhouse, which is as far as we could go.
It's just lovely. It's just very rural, and you're more up in a farmer's dairy field and you have cows coming to nibble on your boat, and it's just a beautiful place.
I'm glad they didn't actually climb up onto the gunnel or anything. They were trying to eat some plants off the top of the boat. So it was very close range cows, and just a lovely little town, and also really quite interesting to get to with these crazy meanders of the Thames at that end. Number 2 is the Chesterfield Canal, which we pretty much have to put on the list because it's where we spent the lockdown.
We love the Chesterfield Canal. Like, we went there expecting to spend 3 weeks there. Ended up spending 3 months there because of lockdown, but kind of feel like we got really lucky. It's really quiet because you have to go on the River Trent to get there, and just the lock flights up to the current head of navigation is just
stunning,
beautiful.
Because it's basically the earliest. I'm not sure if it's the absolute earliest, but I believe it's one of the earliest, if not the earliest, set of staircase locks. And there's actually a triple staircase, another triple staircase, and a double staircase. And it's not, as huge as some of the classic sites like the Cane Hill Flight or the Anderton Boat Lift, but it's an amazing piece of canal engineering in a fairly obscure part of the system. Absolutely worth a visit. And then as you get up to the very top and you come towards the tunnel itself, now the actual stopping point for the Silver Propeller is the turning point towards the end. It's about 1 kilometer further on that you have to do backwards to get to the entrance, now blocked off to the tunnel, but it's quite fun to do. And it actually is that picture you see there. As you can see, there's that tiny bit of brown, that's the canal. Otherwise it looks like I'm just stuck in the trees.
And they're obviously, the Chesterfield Canal Trust are trying to open up the Chesterfield Canal all the way to Chesterfield, which they want to do in the next 7 years. So if that happens, it'll just be absolutely amazing.
And we will figure out a way to return.
Because
one of the non-connected ones for the Silver Propeller, although I'm not sure it'll be running by 2027, is actually Chesterfield itself. So it would be nice to tick that one off as well. And number 1, top one, though obviously it was the R20th, and it is sort of the height of, literally the height, top part you can get to. Absolutely worth it is the Standage Tunnel itself. Not the easiest thing to get to, but so worth it.
Yeah, just for lots of reasons. Like the Huddersfield Narrow Canal, I really loved. We did it quite fast, just in a few days, but it was gorgeous. We had it to ourselves again because we were there in October. And then, just the engineering of the Standage Tunnel is just so impressive. I didn't actually go through the tunnel, me and George, because I didn't think George would want to spend so long on the boat, so in the dark tunnel. So me and George walked over the top, and that was absolutely stunning as well. It was just, it was a lovely day.
So as part of our ongoing trip, our plans currently have us going back through the Standage Tunnel. So I might have Joe drive it and I'll walk over.
Okay.
See what happens. So from our top 5, we're going to go to the most difficult 5. These were the ones that, for various reasons, were not the easiest to visit, either because of planning or just sort of outright strange locations and stuff. Still worth it, but we definitely want to talk about them. So the top one, our sort of number 1 most difficult, is the Walsall Canal, Walsall Town Basin.
Which is the picture there.
Yeah. The basin itself has been recently reconstructed and is quite an interesting little place to visit. And there's a museum right there, that big gray building. But to get to it, you either have to go down a big flight of walks coming off of a canal out of Wolverhampton, or you've got to go up the Walsall Canal itself. We went up the Walsall Canal, and it turns out the Walsall Canal is in need of care.
Yeah, I mean, I know the volunteers do work really hard to keep it clean, but I think it's just overwhelming because the amount of rubbish and the size of the stuff that gets dumped in there is just unbelievable. So you're not just kind of passing the rubbish, you're scraping the bottom of the boat on fridges and bits of car, and it's really, really sad to see because it is such a huge problem.
And yet at the same time, that's part of the reason why it's not getting enough traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And the less traffic it gets, the more it's going to just be allowed to sort of revert to the opposite of nature. So it really needs the visitors, and it really needs the attention, and hopefully if enough people try and get there, it'll just do better.
Yeah, it just needs a bit of love, doesn't
it? Yeah, it really does. Number 2 is the Titford Pools at the Titford Canal there. Now this one is a little bit different. The actual end is totally worth visiting. The Titford Pools are like a little nature reserve. A little bit difficult to turn there, but it's quite pretty, nice little walks and everything, although it is situated among a bunch of motorways that are, in this sort of butterfly roundabouts above you, and it's a bit strange, but it's just a bit hard to get to. It's in an obscure location.
Yeah, so you have to, it's its own arm, and you have to go up 6 locks to get there, and the 6 locks weren't the easiest. Basically, they've all got the anti-vandal keys on, but half of them don't work. So
yeah,
we were basically lucky to get one paddle up.
Yeah, we were trying all of our different. We've got 3 different anti-vandal keys from 3 different manufacturers. None of them worked, and eventually I figured out how to get one to work with a portable screwdriver, and it was just, that was a slow going 6 locks.
Yeah, and I know they sometimes have water shortages up there as well.
Yeah, and then you get to the top and you're immediately faced by an aggregate and tarmac company, and the smells coming from that. And when we arrived, there was actually a boat sitting up there that had recently had a fire, so there was quite a lot of savory smells. And yeah, it's in a really interesting place. The BCN at that point is you're more or less going directly under a major freeway. Yeah. The M something, I don't know which one, I lose track of these. And there was an asbestos remediation going on around us, so there's this crew standing around staring at us like, what the heck are you doing? But certainly an interesting place to visit. Again, really nice place to see. Yeah. And so well worth turning off. Don't just speed past it. Next one, number 3, is Tuitfield at the very, very tip of the Lancaster Canal.
I think the only reason this is hard is because, I mean, it's the most northerly one that there is, so it's far away. But obviously you have to go down the Rufford branch of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, and then you have to do the Ribble Link itself, which is not that hard, but it is a little bit daunting.
Yeah.
If you're not used to rivers, it's kind of 2 tidal rivers to go out on.
2 tidal rivers and Savick Brook, which is really not so much a brook as just a bunch of mud in some strange little angles, and suddenly you're beside a golf court and there's golf balls raining down on your boat, and then you have to reverse into a staircase lock. Absolutely worth the trip.
And then the whole of the Lancaster Canal.
Yeah, and then the whole of the Lancaster, something like 40 miles.
Yeah.
And the Lancaster itself is really easy, almost completely lock free. In fact, I think it is completely lock free, except for if you go down the arm. Lancaster itself, absolutely a beautiful city, worth visiting by far. Totally worth the visit. But
it's just a long way away.
Yeah, and whatever you do, try and come, whether you're going up or back, try and do the Ribble Link with boats that have at least checked out if their engines are actually working, and you don't end up towing a boat like we did. Number 4 is the Pocklington Canal, Beelby Arm. Now, this one's kind of like Lancaster. It's not really that it takes much in the way of planning. We were coming from Goole, so you had to talk to the Associated British Ports, who were running the Goole Ocean Lock, and then there were multiple bridges towards Selby that had to be contacted, and then you have to actually get onto Barnby Barrage
which you have
via
to book
the EA,
into.
which you have to book into.
And because it's tidal, you have to go at certain times.
And that puts you onto the River Derwent, and then you've got about 3 hours, I think, on the River Derwent before you can get to the junction with the Pocklington. The Derwent itself, the rest of it is unfortunately, yeah, you get up to the junction with the Pocklington. Unfortunately, beyond that, it's no longer navigable anymore, as it's more or less been lost to a damaged lock. But
and then you get onto the Pocklington Canal, and if you get there in July like we do, you find it full of weeds.
Yes.
And because of lockdown, I don't think any boats had been through there. So
we've seen more, you know, just like water lilies and I think I was down that hatch like a dozen times before we made it to the basin where the other boats are, and then we continued on to get to Bealby. But
it's funny because it's July and we had that canal to ourselves, and then you see other people talking about, you know, the Trent and Mersey where they're queuing behind 11 boats for a lock, and it's like, why don't people come to these places where there's just, you know,
there's nobody moving, nothing. It's so much peace and quiet, beautiful little towns. The Pocklington Canal is actually undergoing, like they're trying to raise money to do some more restoration past Bealby.
To get it all the way to Pocklington.
Yeah, and it deserves to be visited more often, basically. It's one of those ones that don't worry too much about the tidal ooze. It's not as bad as it sounds. It doesn't exactly ooze, but it doesn't exactly run, you know, super fast. It's absolutely worth the trip. And lastly, number 5, the Lee and Stort Bowback Rivers. This one's just sort of a strange one because Carpenter's Roadlock is right at the edge of the area that was taken over and turned into the Olympic stadiums.
Yeah, so I mean, it's difficult because it's on the other side of London, so you have to cross London to get there.
Yeah, but if you're in London, it is worth the trip. You have to. We were lucky we didn't have to because we actually knew somebody who lived there and had a key and could let us in through the lock to see the area. But usually you have to book, I believe it's a week ahead of time. And you have to make your way all the way to sort of the edge of London and
you
get
can't
there.
Yeah, you can't stay there, you can't moor there, you have to leave again. There's no more ringing.
Yeah, get on and back. But again, really worth the trip just to be able to go around and see the artwork and see the stadium and just
it's quite another unique experience.
Yeah. So last list we're going to do is our most satisfying, and we're going to try and go through a little quicker on this one, I think, because we're getting there on time. But number 1 on our most satisfying is the Huddersfield Narrow Canal Standage Tunnel. Whoops, I've accidentally hit 2. And just take that back. Sorry, Huddersfield Narrow Canal on the Standage and the Standage Tunnel.
Just basically because of everything we've said so far. It was our 20th, so that was really great, and it was just just getting to the top of the Huddersfield Narrow Canal, really.
Yeah, and in a sense, we've got to kind of look at this as the culmination. We had 12 days due to winter stoppages and everything to make it this epic trip that began in Manchester, took us up the Huddersfield, and really we had this trip from Liverpool across the Mersey, up the Manchester Ship Canal, onto the canals at Manchester, and then from Manchester up to the Huddersfield Narrow.
After changing our plans, because we were going to do the Leeds and Liverpool, but then there was a breach in Wigan, so we were going to do the Springsbants and the Leeds and Liverpool was going to be our 20th, but then we had to change our plans, and so it was just a lot, really.
To make it to the Standage Tunnel via that epic trip was just absolutely worthwhile. So totally satisfying. Number 2 is again the River Thames at Inglesham.
Yeah, I think this one because we actually did the whole of the Thames apart from the estuary, but we came through London on the Thames. We went onto the Thames, the tidal Thames at Limehouse,
directly
lock.
Under Tower Bridge.
Yeah, and that's going through central London on the Thames was just fantastic. So to travel from Limehouse Lock all the way to as close as you can get to the source was just a bit of an epic trip.
Yeah, epic, totally worth it. Just amazing to actually get to the end and be like, okay, we finally did it. Number 3 is the River Weaver, Winsford Bridge. This one was just, it was funny. We kind of underestimated this before we actually got there. People were saying, okay, you know, get to the Anderton boat lift, which you need to take to get onto the River Weaver. And people were like, oh, we just go down, you know, maybe go over to Northwich and turn around and then come right back up. So it's like maybe a 1-day thing. But after, I mean, we'd been on the Grand Union for quite a while.
No, the Trenton Mersey.
Oh, Trenton Mersey. Sorry, we were on the Trenton Mersey for quite a while.
And we were there in August, and it was so busy. And then we got onto the River Weaver, and again, we were like, you know, there was a handful of boats there, and it's this lovely big wide river, and we got to go to the junction with the Manchester Ship Canal, and it's really kind of unusual there because it's this big chemical plant. And then we went to the southerlymost point at Winsford Bridge, and it's these flashes that you shouldn't go out on because you'll get grounded. And it was just,
yeah, and there's a couple of strange locks along the way, and it just doesn't get enough traffic, and it doesn't get enough love, but it's absolutely a beautiful little stretch of canal river.
And if they actually open up the loop, so you can go back up, you can go onto the Manchester Ship Canal and then up at Runcorn.
It'll just be amazing to have that loop there. So yeah, the Weaver is at too little traffic, totally worth it. Never want to lose Winsford Bridge area because it's a nice place to moor as well. So number 4 is the Lancaster Canal Tuit Field. Again, most satisfying. I think we'll go through this one quick because it's everything that we've mentioned before.
Yeah, I think the main reason is because when we started the trip, we were in the most southerly point of the connected network, and then we reached the most northerly point.
And it's pretty satisfying to go. We've been as close to Chile as where we're going to get, and as close to the Arctic as where we're going to get. And it's, you know, it's just like, okay, we've done that. We've checked off that north and south. Can't go any further either direction yet. Number 5 is the Calden Canal. This one's, you know, a little bit off to the side as you head towards Leek and everything, and you come down and you've got the Frog Hall Tunnel and the oddly named Uttoxeter Basin.
Yeah, we tried to do this twice because when we first got to the river section, it was in floods. We had to turn around and go to Leek, and then we didn't know whether we'd just be leaving the Calden Canal without making it to Frog Hall, but we went back a week later. And
there was a window of 2 days where we were between it going down just enough that we could make it down still below flood, but not very far below flood. And by the time we made it up, it was already rising again. So it was totally worth the visit. Though the fact is that we didn't actually make it. We didn't fit through Frog Hall Tunnel. This picture here was taken about a second and a half before the solar panels started scraping on the brickwork, and I found out that we would be wedged. There was just no way through. People had told us, you know, oh, those plastic sheets that tell you just, you know, how much room you've got are very conservative, and it's like, well, it's not conservative enough. So
Michael had to reverse out and then reverse back onto the mooring, and then we thought we'd go for a little walk, go to the other end of the tunnel and have a drink because there's a really nice cafe there. It's a really nice place to visit.
Yeah, and as we were walking back, taking George along the walk in a little path that goes around the tunnel, another boat showed up, thankfully much shorter. He had no idea the tunnel was there, which was a bit of a surprise. So he came around the corner and went, oh gosh, and just stopped. And I was like, aha, I will help you. So I jumped onto the front of the boat and using my hands along the roof kind of, you know, directed the front as he went through. So I actually got to ride through the Frog Hall Tunnel.
So that was very satisfying.
Yeah, so that was really satisfying. So basically that's the end of the majority of it. But our top tip for everybody, go all the way.
Yeah, I think it's, these places are really unique. They're really different, and they're often really quiet. So if you like somewhere that isn't, you know, chock-a-block with boaters queuing for locks, then visit these places because they'll surprise you, and yeah, you'll get to experience things that not everyone is experiencing.
Yeah, and if you just go all the way to as far as you can get, you tend to, not only does it feel rewarding, but you actually find things that just are bypassed. Yeah. And they're absolutely worth it, and it's the only way that you're going to actually keep these waterways, you know, in action for the foreseeable future. So, and the second piece of advice, make sure that you bring a very good dog. You know, George has really been instrumental in all of this. So yeah, that's the end of our presentation. and I guess we'll go to the Q&A now.
Michael, Joe, that is truly inspirational. Thank you for taking us through that epic journey. We've had so many questions that I fear we're not going to cover them all in the next 13 minutes. I'll try and handle most of them during that time, and maybe we'll let things move on for another few minutes after 8:30. The first question just really does, I have to ask it, even though I think you covered it. How did you really do no boating before you set off on that journey?
I had been on a family holiday on a narrowboat in 2010, and there were 6 of us on board, and I hadn't planned to stay for the whole week, but I actually left halfway through because it was just too many people in too small a place. So which is why when I told my family that I was going to be moving on board a narrowboat, they were like, but you hated it.
Yeah, and I'd done a very small amount of boating when I lived in Vancouver, basically because I was a poor student. I had no access to a boat, but a friend of a friend of a friend had a motor cruiser, and so I took it through Vancouver Harbor and over to Vancouver Island, I think 3 times. So that was the extent of our boating experience at the time we began all this.
It's very, very impressive. So a whole range of questions have come through, ranging from some questions about the trip to just a question I've got to put to you, Michael. Have you had your beard trimmed specially for this webinar tonight? Because anybody that's seen you on your videos will know this is not the way you normally appear.
No. So that's yeah. I knew that we were trying to get the video out in which I reveal this before this happened, but we just couldn't get through the edit. No, this is strictly a response to the mask mandate.
And not being able to get to a barber.
No, well, not being able to get to a barber. It was annoying me. Things were curling up in strange places, and I was waking up with hairs up my nostrils and stuff. Not usually there. And but no, it was simply that when I realized I was going to have to start wearing a mask when going into shops and stuff, the beard was just untenable. The only way I could do it was to fold the beard over my face and pull the mask across, and that does add a layer of filtration, but is not particularly hygienic. So it's gone for now after 5 years, but it will be back.
Great, we look forward to that. It's we really will. So a question about, I guess maybe more for you, Michael, is why do you think Americans haven't taken to voluntary canal restoration the way the Brits have? Any feel for that? Or is that a fair accusation?
Well, I think I think Americans, if they knew about the canals over here, they'd probably be a little more willing to help over here. American canals, for the most part, well, for one thing, they're largely on the East Coast. So if you're from California, you've probably never even heard of a canal. Although in Venice, California, there are actually canals, and those are in excellent condition. Can't fit a narrowboat down there, and you can travel the entire thing in about 45 minutes. So not amazing. Yeah. I think the thing in American is we go for roads more than we go for boats. It's all that thing with Highway 66. We don't really have the Grand Union. We've got the Mother Road.
And also, when you built canals, you built some pretty impressive canals. So the scale of restoration that would be needed would be just completely different to what we're talking about here. I was on the Blue Ridge.
To fill them in with a lot of toxic dirt. So yeah.
I was on the Blue Ridge a couple of years ago, and there's some canals in that area as you head down through Virginia, and they were pretty mighty waterways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So over the course of, you've listed all these Silver Propeller destinations. Are there any, as you look to perhaps further ventures on the waterways, that you'd think that place should be added?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I would have liked to have seen, for instance, the Riverway. The Godalming down on the way is a really nice trip. And doesn't actually get that many visits. Past a certain point, there's a very low bridge, and so a lot of people just don't go any further. it's worth it.
I'm sure there's others, because there's definitely been times where we've struggled and thought, why isn't this a Silver Propeller location? But I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Well, the River Irwell, at the end of the Manchester Ship Canal.
That's true, yeah.
I hesitate to recommend anybody does it, because I think that's the closest we've come to getting killed. Was the River Irwell, but it was, you know, certainly an interesting visit. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of places that we visited along the K&A, but the K&A is, of course, it's just that so many people end and they don't go all the way to Bristol. You know, so that would be one. At the end of the Sharpness.
Well, the Saul Junction, which is halfway there.
Saul Junction is halfway there, but a lot of people will just turn around and not go to Sharpness. And Sharpness itself is
a deserted port town.
Yeah, it's the canal visit. You end up in there's a little basin, and you're like, you know, really short walk away from being able to look over this beautiful river. Worth the visit. The town itself is you know, a sort of struggling port town, but it's, yeah.
I'm sure there's others, but I can't think of them.
Yeah.
So a question that's just come in, and I will come back to some of the others if we've got time, but how are you working? Where's your income from? And or is this just a great extended holiday, and then you're going to have to work to make up for all this time on the waterways?
Well, so my work is a little bit strange. At the moment, we are not really working. Joe has the YouTube channel, which does give us some income, and we've got Patreon, which helps cover like equipment costs and stuff when things break, which, knock wood, not everything is broken yet. But we do have some rental income on a property that Joe has, and my work, I've worked in visual effects, or I did work in visual effects. That's how I ended up in New Zealand. I was working for Weta Digital, the company that did Lord of the Rings, although that was before me. And I've worked for a number of different visual effects companies, and those long hours we were talking about lead to fairly good pay, especially because it's a very specialized field. So I had put a fairly significant amount of savings away, because I am very minimalist and I don't spend much money except for on experiences. So, you know, basically we've been living off of savings and what income we can make.
So the idea is to get to the end before the money runs out.
Yeah. Yeah. At which point I will take another job, I'm sure. So
no plans for a book deal or anything to cover this trip?
Well, we haven't been approached by any publishers, but
open to offers.
Joe did write a little book of her travels before, the travels that she did on her yearly trip. I actually wrote a ridiculously long vlog that turns into, I think it's almost 2,000 something pages if you try and print it out. So at some point I hope to edit that and maybe, you know, shrink it, and then but we'll see. Yeah, no, most likely I'll return to some sort of work in computer programming, which is really what I do.
Excellent. And how have you found things like connectivity on the waterways?
Not too problematic. Okay, there is a solution if you really need like remote work type thing, which is a bonded modem. They're a bit expensive, but if you get a bonded modem and SIM cards from multiple providers, you can get basically bandwidth, like broadband speeds, and good reliability. Because basically everywhere we go, we find that at least one of the providers has some sort of connectivity. At the moment, we just have a 4G modem running from one company, and we will normally either have cell phone connectivity or we will have internet connectivity. Even in most of the more remote areas. We did find the end of the Chesterfield to be about the worst we've seen.
I think Braunston was the worst.
Yeah, Braunston. There is no connectivity of any sort in Braunston. I don't know what that's all about.
But it's quite nice.
But yeah.
Yeah, I remember that from a hire boat trip a year and a half ago. It's, it was isolation.
Yeah.
So coming to the end of our time, but we've still got a few questions. Have you actually got your Silver Propeller Award? Your plaque for your boat?
Yes. We received it in the mail. So
Excellent.
That's one. And
Good.
It should be on the wall, but it's not made it yet.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's good to see that, because there's been a question about what was the trophy and was it made of silver, and so I'm sorry it's not, but as good stewards of our charitable funds, we are very happy to give an award, but I'm not sure it's going to be silver.
We keep joking on our channel about trying to get to the gold and then the platinum and then potentially eventually the plutonium propeller awards. So if you want to add more,
I'm sure we'll be moving the objectives on a bit. So obviously you've had to plan your way around this trip.
Oh, yeah.
So what resources do you use as you're planning? Because there's been a few questions about that, maybe a few people questioning the routes that you've taken and so on.
Yeah, so
she does most of the planning.
I'm not really sure how it's evolved. It just happened naturally based on needing to be near London the first year. And then, I mean, navigating a route through the BCN where you hit every canal but you don't repeat anything is impossible. So then you have to work out the bits you want to repeat, you know, where you don't want to do a flight of, like, we didn't want to do the Tardy Big twice, for example.
Yeah.
So we use the Canal Plan website, we use our Nicholson's Guide, we use the Canal and River Trust interactive map.
Especially when there's closures.
Yeah, in winter it's a lot harder because we have to plan around the closures, and we've been caught out a couple of times where the notices haven't been accurate. So yeah, it's quite a task.
Yeah, Joe tends to create sort of a spreadsheet and kind of give us a little bit of plan when it involves closures. We haven't exactly been winging it. We've definitely been, you know, figuring out the route. But you do have to react to things like, well, I mean, COVID, the pandemic has thrown off everything.
And then last year, the breach in Wigan, we changed our plans completely.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's mainly
that's narrowboat life, isn't
yeah,
it? You can't plan to be somewhere at a certain time because things happen.
So one of the very early questions, just probably as a final one, one of the very early questions that came in was, in watching your videos, it does appear that it's worth having a boat with a pretty strong engine, really good, capable boat. And it also seems pretty key that you've got two people on board. What would you say about the capability of the boat and that you need to do this? But also, do you think it would be possible for a single-hander to do Silver
right?
Propeller?
Well, yes. Okay, there are a couple of times when a single-hander would have a real problem. Mainly the big tidal rivers.
Like you're not allowed to go from Gaul unless you've got two people on board and things like that.
Yeah, likewise the River Mersey, which again most people won't do, but and London out of Limehouse. So in those cases, I think a single-hander would have to get a buddy aboard. The vast majority of the rest of it, I think, wouldn't be. Obviously, you'd be doing it slower, but
we meet so many single-handers, and
yeah, they
just take it at their pace that they know. A lot of them don't even like help because they know their routine to get through locks. And
yeah,
I don't think you need two people.
No, and I would say that everybody, like everywhere we've gone, we've met a single-hander who's done it. So I don't think there's ever a place that you can't go. You know, the only places would be the safety conscious ones where it would be better to have somebody else in case you have, you know, like a medical accident or something like that. So that's the tidal rivers. As for the capability, yeah, I get this question a lot. We've got a 45 horsepower Barishshire. I would say that it's been overpowered for all situations except for when we actually had to tow a boat that had gone stricken and was disabled on the
River Douglas.
Yeah, sorry, the River Douglas. As we were crossing from the Ribble Link, their boat broke down, and a boat towed it for us. Well, a boat towed it up to us. Then we took over the tow, and we were side by side. If they'd been on the end, I think we would have had plenty of power side by side. even the 45 horsepower was struggling. But
I get really nervous on rivers, but having been towing that boat, it gave me just so much more confidence in our boat, because I kind of figured if we can tow that boat, then we're fine.
And we are. I mean, we have a really good, I would say that it's, for the vast majority of the system, if you don't run into that problem, 35 horsepower is probably fine. I wouldn't go below that, especially on the rivers. But if you time everything right and you make sure you go and you know, you've got the good advice from the lock keepers, especially about tidal sections, most of the time, I mean, honestly, with maybe 5 exceptions, I've never had to go above 2,300 RPM. And you know, I know how high it can go. We've never had to go anywhere near that high because I get into cavitation on the prop anyway. So yeah.
Well, look, we're right out of time. Really do thank you guys for taking us through that and taking the time to get to all these far-flung areas in the waterways. I'd also like to thank everybody who's joined us tonight. Please do make sure that you follow these guys, and because, as they say, if they weren't moving, what would they be doing? And I'm sure there's plenty more ventures to go to come. So follow them online, and please also, if you can, get on the IWA website, have a look at the Silver Propeller Challenge. Perhaps surprise yourself at how many of the challenge locations that you've done yourself. And if you haven't yet ventured out, then I recommend that you follow in these guys' footsteps and follow in their wake, and you'll have an adventure, I'm sure. Michael and Joe, thank you. To everyone that's joined us, thank you and good night.